The compound bow looked ancient in her hands, carbon fiber gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of Fort Blackstone's armory. 12 seasoned Delta Force operatives stood frozen, watching surveillance footage replay in slow motion as hostile after hostile dropped like dominoes, each falling within a 3-second window. The woman who'd been dismissed as the consultant with the toy weapon had just accomplished what their best team couldn't achieve in under 2 minutes. Tank Rodriguez, the unit's golden boy with more confirmed kills than anyone in recent memory, stared at the screen with his mouth slightly open, his prized Scar H assault rifle suddenly feeling heavy in his grip. The silence stretched until someone whispered what everyone was thinking. Who the hell is she? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Fort Blackstone's advanced combat training facility gleamed like a temple to modern warfare. The main corridor stretched for nearly a quarter mile, its polished concrete floors reflecting rows of digital displays that tracked everything from ammunition expenditure to kill-to-injury ratios. Glass cases lined the walls, showcasing the evolution of military hardware from Vietnam-era M16s to the latest smart targeting systems. The air carried the sharp scent of gun oil and the subtle hum of climate control systems working overtime to maintain optimal conditions for both human performance and equipment precision. Sarah Chun walked through those corridors with the steady pace of someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Her government-issued duffel bag sat lightly on her shoulder, containing gear that would make most of the base personnel either laugh or scratch their heads in confusion. She wore standard-issue fatigues that fit well enough, but somehow managed to look like borrowed clothes. And her boots had the kind of worn-in comfort that suggested long miles in places that didn't appear on official maps. The reception desk dominated the facility's entrance like a command center, complete with 3 monitors displaying real-time training schedules, personnel assignments, and what looked suspiciously like a leaderboard ranking active operatives by various metrics. Behind the desk, Sergeant Lisa Murphy processed Sarah's paperwork with the efficient disinterest of someone who'd seen countless consultants, contractors, and temporary personnel pass through these doors. Chun, Sarah, civilian consultant, assigned to Training Evaluation Protocol 7, Murphy read from her screen without looking up. You'll be observing live exercise alpha this afternoon, participating if cleared by Colonel Peterson. She slid a temporary access card across the desk, along with a facility map that looked more like a blueprint for a small city. Equipment checkout is down the main corridor, 3rd door on your left. Try not to get in anyone's way. Sarah accepted the card and map with a quiet nod, her expression giving away nothing about the fact that she'd memorized the facilities layout weeks ago from satellite imagery and architectural plans that officially didn't exist. The temporary access card would get her into most areas, but the real clearance was already encoded in systems that Sergeant Murphy would never see. The equipment armory occupied a space that could have housed a small aircraft, its walls lined with weapons that represented the cutting edge of military technology. Digital inventory systems tracked every rifle, every round of ammunition, every piece of tactical gear with the precision of a Swiss watch. The morning light streaming through reinforced windows caught the metallic surfaces of assault rifles arranged in perfect rows, each one capable of delivering devastating firepower at ranges that would have been considered impossible just a generation ago. Tony Williams' calcined Ghost was cleaning his precision rifle when Sarah entered, the weapon disassembled with mechanical precision across a workstation that looked like an operating table. His fingers moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who could reassemble the rifle blindfolded, each component sliding into place with satisfying clicks. He glanced up as Sarah approached the checkout counter, taking in her unremarkable appearance and civilian consultant badge with the sort of dismissive assessment that came naturally to someone who'd spent years evaluating threats and assets. Let me guess, Ghost said, not pausing in his work. You're here for the standard observer package. Kevlar vest, radio headset, maybe a sidearm if you've got the paperwork. His tone carried the weary patience of someone explaining obvious things to people who should already know better. Sarah shook her head and pointed to a form on her tablet. Actually, I'll need access to personal equipment storage. I brought my own gear. Ghost's hand stopped moving for a fraction of a second. His curiosity piqued despite himself. Civilians who brought their own equipment usually fell into two categories: former military trying to relive past glory, or contractors with more money than sense who'd bought expensive toys they barely knew how to use. He saved his work and walked over to examine Sarah's authorization codes, expecting to see the usual collection of tactical accessories and maybe an overpriced rifle with too many modifications. Storage Unit 47, he said after scanning the codes, his tone shifting to something closer to professional courtesy. Down the hall, past the simulation rooms. Whatever you've got in there, just remember that live exercise alpha isn't a game. Tank's team has been preparing for this evaluation for months, and they don't appreciate distractions. Sarah thanked him and headed toward the storage area, her footsteps echoing softly in corridors that seemed designed to amplify the significance of every sound. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The storage unit opened with a quiet click, revealing a custom case that looked deceptively simple from the outside. Inside, nestled in form-fitting foam, lay a compound bow that seemed to bridge centuries of weapons technology. The bow itself was a masterpiece of engineering, its carbon fiber limbs incorporating materials that most aerospace engineers would recognize, but few military personnel would expect to see in a weapon that traced its ancestry back to medieval battlefields. The arrows arranged beside it appeared conventional at first glance, but closer inspection would reveal tips crafted from materials that didn't appear in any public database and fletching, designed according to principles that had been classified, for reasons that had nothing to do with national security and everything to do with plausible deniability. Sarah assembled the weapon with movements that spoke of muscle memory developed over years of practice in situations where failure meant consequences that extended far beyond personal disappointment. The bow's weight felt perfect in her hands, its balance point precisely calibrated to her draw length and shooting style. She tested the string tension with a gentle pull, listening for the subtle harmonic that indicated proper setup. The corridor outside Storage Unit 47 saw occasional foot traffic as personnel moved between training areas and administrative spaces. A few glanced through the open door as Sarah worked, their expressions ranging from polite curiosity to barely concealed amusement. One junior operative paused long enough to take a photograph with his phone, undoubtedly destined for the group chat that kept the base entertained, with a steady stream of unusual sightings and minor scandals. David Kim, the unit's tech specialist, happened to be passing by when Sarah emerged with her bow case. His background in engineering made him more curious than dismissive, and he found himself wondering about the technical specifications of a Koti weapon that looked simultaneously primitive and sophisticated. "Planning to hunt deer during the exercise?" he asked, his tone friendly enough to suggest genuine interest rather than mockery. "Something like that," Sarah replied, adjusting the case strap across her shoulder. "Though I suspect the deer might be better armed than usual." Kim laughed, appreciating the dry humor even as he mentally filed away questions about how a compound bow would perform in a tactical scenario designed around modern firearms. He'd seen enough unconventional solutions in his career to know that innovation often came from unexpected directions, but this seemed like bringing a sword to a gunfight, even if it was a very well-engineered sword. The main training floor occupied the facility's central space, a vast area that could be reconfigured for dozens of different scenarios. Today's setup resembled an urban environment, complete with building facades, vehicle obstacles, and multiple levels connected by staircases and catwalks. 12 positions throughout the space would be occupied by hostile targets, each one equipped with advanced sensors and response capabilities that made them significantly more challenging than traditional static targets. Marcus Rodriguez, universally known as Tank, stood at the center of it all like a general surveying his battlefield. His gear represented the best that military technology had to offer, from his custom-modified Scar-H rifle to the communications suite that kept him connected to every member of his team. Tank had earned his reputation through a combination of tactical brilliance and the kind of aggressive problem-solving that left hostile forces with very few options, most of them unpleasant. His team gathered around him with the casual confidence of professionals who'd worked together long enough to communicate with glances and gestures. Each operative brought their own specialty to the group, creating a collective capability that could adapt to almost any scenario. They'd been preparing for live exercise alpha for weeks, studying the layout, timing their movements, and rehearsing contingencies until their response patterns had become as automatic as breathing. 12 hostiles, unknown number of civilians, multiple entry points, Tank briefed his team, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Standard rules of engagement apply, but remember that speed matters as much as accuracy. The evaluation committee will be measuring our response time down to the second. Rachel Torres, the team's medic and support specialist, checked her gear one final time while listening to Tank's briefing. Her role involved more than medical support. In scenarios like this, she often provided overwatch and backup for the primary assault elements. The equipment she carried reflected this dual responsibility, medical supplies sharing space with tactical gear, designed to keep the team effective under fire. "Any word on the observer situation?" asked Tony Williams, nodding toward the elevated platforms where evaluation personnel would monitor the exercise. "I heard we've got some kind of consultant watching today." Tank's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd been briefed about the civilian observer, but hadn't been told much beyond the fact that she represented some kind of interdepartmental evaluation program. In Tank's experience, observers usually meant bureaucrats looking for ways to justify budget cuts or impose new regulations that would make their jobs more difficult. "Just focus on the mission," he said. "Whatever she's here to observe, let's make sure she sees what Delta Force is capable of." The observation deck provided a clear view of the entire training area through reinforced glass that could stop rifle rounds, while remaining perfectly transparent. Colonel James Peterson occupied the central position, his weathered face reflecting years of command decisions that had shaped both his unit and his understanding of what it meant to serve at the highest levels of military capability. Beside him, civilian contractors and evaluation personnel prepared recording equipment and assessment protocols that would reduce the upcoming exercise to numbers and statistics. Sarah took her position at the far end of the observation deck, her bow case resting beside her chair in a way that seemed almost casual. The other observers had given her plenty of space, whether out of courtesy or uncertainty about proper protocol when dealing with civilian consultants. She appeared to be reviewing briefing materials on her tablet, but her attention was actually focused on the team movements below and the subtle indicators that would tell her everything she needed to know about their tactical approach. The digital countdown displayed prominently throughout the facility showed 10 minutes until exercise commencement. Tank's team used the time for final equipment checks and brief tactical discussions, their movements efficient and purposeful. Each operative understood their role in the mission plan, and their confidence showed in the relaxed way they handled their weapons and gear. "Attention all personnel," came the announcement through the facility's public address system, live. "Exercise Alpha will commence in 5 minutes. All observers and evaluation personnel should be in position." Participating operatives should conduct final safety checks and await the exercise start signal. Sarah stood and opened her bow case, assembling her weapon with smooth, practiced movements that drew curious glances from nearby observers. The compound bow looked distinctly out of place in an environment dominated by high-tech military equipment, and several people found themselves wondering if they were witnessing some kind of experimental program or elaborate demonstration. Colonel Peterson noticed the activity and walked over to Sarah's position, his expression professionally neutral, but clearly curious about the unusual equipment. "Miss Chun, I trust you understand that this is a live-fire exercise with significant safety protocols in place. Your observer status doesn't include participation unless specifically authorized." "I understand completely, Colonel," Sarah replied, testing her bowstring with a gentle pull. "I'm here to observe and evaluate, nothing more. Though I did want to have my equipment ready in case any questions arose about alternative tactical approaches." Peterson nodded, though his expression suggested that questions about compound bows weren't high on his list of tactical priorities. He returned to his position as the final countdown began, leaving Sarah to complete her preparations in relative privacy. The exercise began with a burst of activity that showcased exactly why Delta Force had earned its reputation as one of the world's premier special operations units. Tank's team moved with precision and coordination that made their assault look almost choreographed, each operative flowing from position to position with practiced efficiency. Their communication was minimal but effective, hand signals and brief radio calls coordinating movements that had been rehearsed until they became instinctive. The first 3 hostile targets fell within 30 seconds, taken down by precisely coordinated fire that eliminated threats while minimizing exposure time. Tank's Scar-H rifle barked rhythmically as he advanced through the urban environment, each shot finding its mark with mechanical precision. Behind him, his teammates provided covering fire and security, their own weapons adding to a symphony of controlled violence that represented the pinnacle of military training. Sarah watched the action unfold with the detached interest of someone analyzing a complex problem from multiple angles. Her tablet displayed real-time data about the exercise, including target elimination rates, ammunition expenditure, and movement patterns that would be analyzed long after the exercise concluded. But her real attention was focused on subtle details that wouldn't appear in any official report: reaction times under stress, adaptation to unexpected obstacles, and the kind of tactical intuition that separated good soldiers from exceptional ones. By the 2-minute mark, Tank's team had eliminated 8 of the 12 hostile targets, their progress steady but not spectacular. The remaining targets occupied positions that required more complex approaches, and the team's advance had slowed as they adapted to increased resistance. This was exactly the kind of scenario that separated training exercises from real-world operations, where enemy forces didn't follow predictable patterns and complications arose without warning. Tank paused behind a concrete barrier, his breathing controlled despite the physical demands of the exercise. His tactical display showed the locations of remaining targets, but accessing them would require exposing his team to potential crossfire. This was the moment where tactical brilliance mattered most, where the difference between good planning and exceptional leadership became apparent. "Williams, can you get an angle on target 9 from the elevated position?" Tank's voice came through the radio with calm authority, even as he calculated risks and alternatives with the speed that made him invaluable in situations where hesitation meant failure. "Negative on a clean shot," Williams replied from his sniper position. 2. Much interference from civilian markers. "We need a different approach." The exercise clock showed 4 minutes elapsed, with 8 targets eliminated and 4 remaining. Tank's team was performing well within acceptable parameters, but the evaluation committee would be measuring them against standards that demanded excellence rather than adequacy. Every second that passed represented points deducted from their final score. and every decision carried consequences that would influence their assignments for months to come. Sarah set down her tablet and picked up her bow, the movement casual. Enough that most observers didn't notice the transition. She'd seen enough to understand the tactical situation and the constraints that were slowing Tank's advance. The remaining targets occupied positions that favored defensive advantages, and standard assault tactics would require time and resources that might not be available in a real-world scenario. Colonel Peterson noticed Sarah's equipment change and frowned slightly, uncertain about proper protocol in a situation that hadn't been covered in his briefing materials. "Miss Chun, I need to remind you that observer status doesn't include—" "I understand, Colonel," Sarah interrupted gently. Her attention focused on the exercise area below. "I'm simply preparing to demonstrate an alternative approach if requested, purely for evaluation purposes." Tank's team reached the 6-minute mark with the same 4 targets still active, their advance stalled by tactical challenges that couldn't be solved through firepower alone. The exercise parameters allowed for a maximum of 10 minutes, but their current pace suggested they might not eliminate all targets within the time limit. Tank's frustration was visible in his movements, the kind of tension that came from knowing that exceptional performance was slipping away, despite everything his team had done correctly. The observation deck had grown quiet as the exercise's complexity became apparent. What had started as a routine demonstration of elite capabilities had evolved into something more challenging, the kind of scenario that tested not just training, but adaptability and creative problem-solving under pressure. Sarah stepped forward to the observation deck's edge, her bow held in a casual ready position that suggested familiarity rather than bravado. The movement was subtle enough that Tank's team didn't notice, their attention focused entirely on the tactical puzzle that was preventing them from completing their mission within acceptable parameters. "Colonel Peterson," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying just enough authority to suggest that her request deserved serious consideration. "With your permission, I'd like to demonstrate an alternative tactical approach, purely for evaluation purposes, of course." Peterson's eyebrows lifted fractionally, the only visible sign of his surprise at Sarah's request. In 23 years of military service, he'd learned to recognize moments when standard protocols might need flexible interpretation, but this situation fell well outside his usual experience. A civilian consultant requesting permission to intervene in an active Delta Force training exercise wasn't covered in any manual he'd ever read. "Ms. Chun, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Live Exercise Alpha involves live ammunition and targets programmed to respond with lethal force simulation," Peterson said, his tone carrying the measured authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that carried life and death consequences. "Our insurance protocols alone would require extensive paperwork before any civilian participation could be authorized." Sarah nodded respectfully, but her grip on the compound bow never wavered. Below them, Tank's team had reached the 7-minute mark with their advance effectively stalled by the tactical complexity of the remaining target positions. The exercise clock continued its relentless countdown, each passing second representing points deducted from what had started as a textbook demonstration of elite military capability. "I understand the liability concerns, Colonel, but my authorization extends beyond standard civilian parameters," Sarah replied, reaching into her jacket to produce a document folder that hadn't been there moments before. "I believe you'll find that my clearance level provides sufficient coverage for evaluation activities that support interdepartmental assessment protocols." Peterson accepted the folder with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that paperwork often mattered more than common sense in military decision-making. The documents inside carried classifications that made him blink twice, authentication codes that required verification through channels he rarely accessed, and authorization signatures from officials whose names appeared on documents he wasn't supposed to know existed. One document in particular caught his attention, A brief memo on official letterhead that included phrases like full operational authority during evaluation periods and assessment activities necessary for comprehensive analysis of tactical effectiveness. The language was bureaucratic enough to provide legal cover while being vague enough to encompass almost any activity that could be justified as evaluation-related. "This is highly irregular," Peterson muttered, though his tone had shifted from resistance to resignation. "What exactly are you proposing to demonstrate?" Sarah gestured toward the exercise area below, where Tank's team had positioned themselves behind cover while analyzing the defensive positions that protected the remaining 4 targets. Alternative engagement protocols using non-standard equipment configurations. The demonstration would provide valuable data about tactical flexibility and adaptation to resource constraints. The military translation of Sarah's carefully neutral language was simple enough. She wanted to show that a compound bow could accomplish what high-tech assault rifles were struggling to achieve. Peterson found himself caught between professional skepticism and curiosity about whether such an unconventional approach could actually work in a tactical environment designed around modern military hardware. "The safety protocols would need to be modified," Peterson said slowly, his mind already working through the technical requirements for integrating an authorized participant into an active exercise. "Your targets would need to be reconfigured for non-lethal impact assessment, and we'd need real-time monitoring to ensure no interference with the primary team's mission." Sarah's smile was barely visible, but her appreciation for Peterson's practical approach was evident in the way she relaxed slightly. "The targets are already configured for multiple engagement types, Colonel. My equipment is designed for precision, incapacitation rather than lethal force." The demonstration would actually provide excellent data about alternative tactical approaches under identical conditions. Below them, Tank's frustration was becoming more apparent as his team's advance remained stalled. The exercise parameters allowed for 10 minutes total, and they were rapidly approaching the point where time constraints would force them to accept an incomplete mission. In real-world operations, such limitations might mean the difference between successful hostage rescue and catastrophic failure. "Williams, talk to me about Target 11. Tank's voice carried through the radio system, his professional calm masking the tension that came from watching a perfect operation slowly degrade into something merely adequate. "Still no clean approach, boss," Williams replied from his elevated position. "The angle's too tight, and civilian markers are blocking secondary positions. We'd need to reposition the entire team to get access." Tank checked his tactical display, calculating the time required for repositioning against the exercise clock that continued its relentless countdown. Moving the entire team would consume at least 2 minutes, leaving insufficient time to engage the remaining targets within acceptable parameters. The mathematics of the situation were unforgiving, but alternative approaches weren't immediately apparent. Peterson finished reviewing Sarah's documentation and handed the folder back with the resigned expression of someone who'd learned that unusual situations required unusual solutions. "Ms. Chen, I'm authorizing your participation under evaluation. Protocol 77 Alpha. Your demonstration will be recorded and analyzed as part of the exercise assessment. Please understand that any deviation from safety parameters will result in immediate termination of your participation." Sarah nodded her acknowledgement and moved toward the stairs that led from the observation deck to the exercise floor. Her movements carried the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to transitioning from planning to action without hesitation. The compound bow in her hand seemed to transform from an anachronistic curiosity into a precision instrument as she descended toward the tactical environment below. The exercise floor felt different from ground level, the urban environment more imposing and the distances more challenging than they appeared from the observation deck above. Tank's team occupied positions that provided excellent cover and fields. of fire for conventional weapons, but Sarah's tactical requirements were entirely different. Her approach would need to account for trajectory calculations that had nothing to do with ballistic tables and everything to do with physics principles that most military personnel studied briefly and then forgot. Tank noticed the new arrival. Immediately, his peripheral vision trained to detect any changes in the tactical environment that might affect his team's performance. The sight of a civilian consultant carrying a compound bow into an active exercise area triggered every alarm bell in his professional consciousness, but his radio crackled with Peterson's voice before he could voice his objections. All exercise personnel, be advised that Evaluation Observer Chun is authorized for demonstration activities under Protocol 77 Alpha. Continue primary mission parameters. Observer activities will not interfere with team objectives. Tank's expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession, settling finally on professional resignation mixed with considerable skepticism. In his experience, civilian observers were useful for generating reports and justifying budgets, but their understanding of tactical realities rarely extended beyond theoretical knowledge gleaned from briefing rooms and academic studies. "Copy that, Control," Tank replied, his tone maintaining professional courtesy while clearly communicating his opinion about civilian interference in military operations. Team continues primary mission. Observer activities noted. Sarah positioned herself at what appeared to be a suboptimal location near the exercise area's edge, her vantage point offering limited visibility of the target positions that had stalled Tank's advance. To most observers, her position seemed poorly chosen, lacking the elevated perspective or protective cover that tactical doctrine would recommend for overwatch positions. The compound bow emerged from its case with mechanical precision, Sarah's assembly process revealing layers of technological sophistication that weren't immediately apparent in the weapon's traditional appearance. The arrow she selected appeared conventional at first glance, but closer inspection would have revealed specialized tips, designed according to principles that merged ancient accuracy with modern material science. Tank's team maintained their positions while Sarah completed her preparations, their attention divided between the mission objectives that remained frustratingly out of reach and the curiosity about what exactly a civilian consultant planned to accomplish with medieval weaponry in a modern tactical environment. The exercise clock showed 8 minutes and 30 seconds elapsed, leaving precious little time for either conventional assault or unconventional demonstrations. Sarah's first arrow seemed to appear in her bow without any visible drawing motion, the compound mechanism's efficiency allowing for preparation that happened faster than most observers could follow. Her stance reflected years of practice in conditions that bore no resemblance to controlled range environments. Muscle memory developed through repetition under circumstances that had demanded perfection without providing second chances. The arrow's flight path traced a gentle arc that seemed almost leisurely compared to the linear trajectories of rifle rounds, but its destination was never in doubt. Target 9 occupied a defensive position that had defied Tank's team for over 3 minutes, protected by cover arrangements that made conventional approach angles impossible. Sarah's arrow descended from above, its specialized tip making contact with the target sensor array in a way that triggered immediate shutdown protocols. The observation deck fell silent as the target elimination registered on the exercise monitoring systems, the unexpected success creating a moment of cognitive dissonance among observers who'd been mentally preparing for demonstration failure. Sarah was already preparing her second arrow before most people realized that her first shot had found its mark. Target 10 fell 6 seconds later, the arrow's impact triggering the same shutdown response, despite the target's position behind cover that should have provided complete protection from conventional weapons. Sarah's shooting position allowed for trajectory angles that bypassed defensive arrangements, designed around direct fire weapons, her compound bow providing capabilities that the exercise designers hadn't considered when creating the urban environment layout. Tank's radio crackled with confused reports from his team members, their tactical displays showing target eliminations that didn't correspond to any actions they'd taken. Control, we're showing eliminations on targets 9 and 10. Can you confirm? Engagement authority and method? Peterson's voice carried a note of amazement that professional military bearing couldn't entirely conceal. Confirmed eliminations by demonstration observer using alternative engagement protocols. Continue primary mission on remaining targets. Sarah's third arrow was already in flight before Tank's team had fully processed the implications of what they were witnessing. Target 11 occupied the most challenging position in the entire exercise layout, protected by multiple layers of cover and positioned to maximize defensive advantages against conventional assault approaches. The arrow's flight path seemed to defy basic principles of ballistics, following a trajectory that curved around obstacles in ways that violated every rule Tank had learned about projectile weapons. The target's elimination triggered a moment of absolute silence on the exercise floor, broken only by the mechanical sounds of the facility's ventilation systems and the distant hum of electronic monitoring equipment. Tank's team stood frozen, in positions that had been carefully calculated for assault approaches that were no longer necessary, their weapons trained on targets that no longer existed. Sarah's final arrow found target 12 before the exercise clock reached 9 minutes, the elimination completing a demonstration that had accomplished in under 30 seconds what Tank's elite team had been unable to achieve in over 3 minutes. The compound bow returned to its resting position with the same fluid motion that had characterized the entire engagement, Sarah's breathing pattern showing no sign of the stress that typically accompanied precision shooting under observation. The exercise floor remained silent for several heartbeats, the implications of what had just occurred filtering through the consciousness of observers and participants alike. Tank's team had witnessed the elimination of 4 targets that had represented the difference between mission success and failure, accomplished by a civilian consultant, using a weapon that most of them would have dismissed as completely unsuitable for tactical applications. Peterson's voice broke the silence with the kind of measured professionalism that military officers used when dealing with situations that fell outside standard operational parameters. Exercise complete. All personnel returned to designated debriefing areas for assessment and evaluation discussion. Tank lowered his rifle slowly, his expression cycling through emotions that included frustration, amazement, and the kind of professional curiosity that came from witnessing capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about tactical effectiveness. His team gathered around him with the subdued demeanor of professionals who just discovered that their understanding of weapons effectiveness might need significant revision. Sarah disassembled her compound bow with the same methodical precision that had characterized its deployment, each component returning to its designated position in the custom case with mechanical efficiency. Her movements showed no trace of triumph or satisfaction, just the practiced routine of someone concluding a successful demonstration of proven capabilities. The observation deck buzzed with quiet conversations as evaluation personnel attempted to process data that didn't fit established categories for tactical assessment. Digital recordings would be analyzed for weeks, but the immediate impact was already apparent in the way observers looked at Sarah with expressions that mixed respect with barely concealed amazement. David Kim approached Sarah as she completed her equipment securing, his engineering background driving curiosity about the technical aspects of what he'd just witnessed. "Miss Chun, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you calculate those trajectory angles? The physics of what I just saw seems to violate several basic principles of ballistic science." Sarah smiled politely while securing the final latches on her equipment case. Modern materials science allows for some interesting possibilities when combined with traditional delivery systems, Mr. Kim. The arrows incorporate design features that provide enhanced flight characteristics under specific conditions. Kim nodded, though his expression suggested that Sarah's explanation raised more questions than it answered. The demonstration had clearly involved more than enhanced materials, but the technical details would require analysis that went beyond casual observation. Would it be possible to examine the technical specifications for evaluation purposes? Of course. I'm afraid that technical documentation is classified under the same protocols that authorize today's demonstration, Sarah replied, her tone remaining friendly while making it clear that certain information wouldn't be available for general distribution. But I'd be happy to discuss general principles if that would be helpful for your evaluation process. Tank's team filed past them toward the debriefing area, their equipment secured and their expressions reflecting the kind of professional introspection that followed encounters with unexpected realities. Tank himself paused near Sarah's position, his demeanor carrying the grudging respect that elite operators reserve for demonstrated competence. Ms. Chun, I have to admit that what I just witnessed challenges some fundamental assumptions about tactical effectiveness, Tank said, his tone carefully neutral but not hostile. I'd be interested in understanding how civilian consultants develop capabilities that apparently exceed current military training standards. Sarah's response carried the diplomatic precision of someone accustomed to navigating sensitive professional territories. Mr. Rodriguez, I think you'll find that military training standards are actually quite excellent. Sometimes the challenge isn't the quality of training, but the limitations of available tools and approaches. Your team's tactical execution was flawless within the parameters of conventional methodology. Tank considered this response for several moments, recognizing both the compliment and the subtle implication that conventional methodology might not represent the full spectrum of tactical possibilities. Perhaps we could arrange some kind of cross-training opportunity. My team is always interested in expanding our tactical capabilities. That's an interesting suggestion, Sarah replied, though her tone suggested that such arrangements would depend on factors beyond immediate discussion. I believe Colonel Peterson will be conducting detailed evaluation sessions over the next few days. Those discussions might provide opportunities to explore various training enhancement possibilities. The debriefing area occupied a conference room that had been designed to accommodate detailed analysis of training exercises, its walls lined with displays that could present multiple perspectives simultaneously. Tank's team took their usual positions around the central table, their equipment secured and their attention focused on the kind of professional self-assessment that separated elite units from merely competent ones. Colonel Peterson entered the debriefing area with the measured pace of someone who'd spent the previous 10 minutes attempting to reconcile what he'd witnessed with established tactical doctrine. His expression carried the professional neutrality that senior officers developed when dealing with situations that required careful consideration before official responses could be formulated. Gentlemen, ladies, what we've just witnessed represents a significant development in our understanding of tactical capabilities and alternative engagement methodologies. Peterson began, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making sense of complex situations for subordinates who needed clear guidance. The demonstration provided valuable data about adaptive approaches and non-conventional problem-solving under tactical constraints. Tank raised his hand with the respectful attention-seeking gesture that military protocol required in formal debriefing situations. Sir, request permission to ask about the evaluation criteria for today's exercise. Are we being assessed against conventional tactical standards or against the alternative methodologies demonstrated by the civilian consultant? Peterson's pause before responding suggested that this question had occurred to him as well, and that satisfactory answers might require consultations with authorities beyond the immediate facility. Sergeant Rodriguez, your team's performance met all established criteria for tactical excellence within conventional parameters. The demonstration activities were conducted under separate evaluation protocols that don't directly impact your team's assessment scores. This response satisfied nobody completely, but it provided sufficient bureaucratic cover to prevent immediate controversy while allowing time for more detailed analysis of the demonstration's implications. Tank's team exchanged glances that communicated shared uncertainty about how alternative methodologies might affect future training requirements and operational assignments. Sarah entered the debriefing area as Peterson concluded his preliminary remarks, her presence shifting the room's dynamics in ways that reflected the impact of her demonstration on everyone who'd witnessed it. She carried herself with the same understated confidence that had characterized her entire visit, but the context had changed in ways that made her unremarkable appearance seem almost deliberately misleading. Ms. Chun, thank you for participating in today's evaluation activities, Peterson said, his tone carrying genuine appreciation mixed with professional curiosity about the broader implications of what had occurred. Your demonstration provided valuable insights into alternative tactical approaches that will certainly influence our future training development discussions. Sarah nodded politely, her expression giving away nothing about whether Peterson's carefully diplomatic language matched her own assessment of the demonstration's significance. Thank you for accommodating the evaluation requirements, Colonel. I believe the data collected today will prove quite useful for interdepartmental analysis of tactical effectiveness and training optimization. The formal language satisfied protocol requirements while avoiding specific commitments that might complicate future discussions about training modifications or capability assessments. Everyone present understood that the real conversations about what had occurred would happen in classified settings with participants who possessed clearances that exceeded their current authorization levels. Tank leaned forward slightly, his curiosity overcoming diplomatic restraint despite the formal settings constraints on direct questioning. Ms. Chen, without violating any classification restrictions, would you be able to share general insights about how civilian evaluation programs assess military tactical effectiveness? Your demonstration suggests evaluation criteria that extend beyond our current training parameters. Sarah's response came after a pause that suggested careful consideration of how much information could be shared without crossing security boundaries that everyone present respected but didn't fully understand. Mr. Rodriguez, I think it's fair to say that tactical effectiveness encompasses a broader spectrum of capabilities than any single training program can address comprehensively. The goal of evaluation activities is to identify opportunities for enhancement rather than to critique existing capabilities. This diplomatically phrased non-answer satisfied protocol requirements while providing enough substance to suggest that Tank's questions were reasonable even if complete answers weren't immediately available. The subtext was clear enough. Sarah's demonstration represented capabilities that exceeded current military training standards, and the implications of this reality would require careful consideration by authorities with broader perspectives than facility-level personnel. Peterson concluded the debriefing session with the kind of structured summary that military procedures required for official documentation purposes. Assignment schedules would continue as planned. Training evaluations would be processed according to established criteria, and detailed analysis of alternative methodology demonstrations would be conducted through appropriate channels by qualified personnel. As the debriefing participants filed out toward their respective duties, the underlying tension remained unresolved. Tank's team had witnessed capabilities that challenged their understanding of tactical effectiveness, while Sarah had demonstrated proficiency that raised questions about the relationship between civilian consultants and military operational requirements. The facility returned to its normal operational rhythm as afternoon training sessions commenced, and administrative personnel processed the data generated by live exercise, Alpha, but the undercurrent of uncertainty about what had been demonstrated and what it might mean for future training development continued to influence conversations in ways that would persist long after Sarah's visit concluded. The equipment requisition forms lay scattered across Tank's desk like evidence of a crime he couldn't quite identify. Each document represented requests for advanced tactical gear, specialized ammunition, and weapons modifications that had been approved without question for months. Now staring at line items that totaled more than most people's annual salaries, Tank found himself wondering whether the Delta Force equipment budget represented genuine tactical necessity or elaborate theater, designed to impress observers who measured effectiveness by price tags rather than results. Sarah's compound bow case rested against the wall of the facility's main corridor, ignored by passing personnel who'd already processed yesterday's demonstration and moved on to their regular duties. The case looked unremarkable among the tactical equipment that filled every corner of Fort Blackstone, but Tank couldn't shake the memory of watching 4 heavily defended targets fall to arrows that had cost less than a single magazine of his specialized ammunition. Tony Williams emerged from the armory carrying his precision rifle in its custom case, the weapon representing 18 months of modifications and adjustments that had transformed a standard military rifle into a specialized instrument capable of extraordinary accuracy under specific conditions. He'd spent countless hours perfecting his marksmanship skills and optimizing his equipment configuration, but yesterday's demonstration had left him questioning whether complexity always equaled effectiveness. "Tank, you got a minute?" Williams asked, setting his rifle case down carefully before approaching Tank's workstation. "I've been thinking about yesterday's exercise, and I wanted to run something by you." Tank gestured toward an empty chair, grateful for the opportunity to discuss observations that had been troubling him since the debriefing session concluded. Military culture discouraged excessive introspection about tactical doctrine, but yesterday's events had created questions that seemed to demand serious consideration despite their potential implications for established procedures. "I keep replaying those arrow trajectories in my head," Williams continued, his tone carrying the analytical precision of someone trained to evaluate ballistic performance under combat conditions. "The physics of what we witnessed shouldn't have been possible with conventional archery equipment, but the target eliminations were definitely real." Tank nodded, his own technical background providing sufficient understanding to appreciate Williams' confusion. "I've been thinking the same thing. The engagement angles she used would have been impossible with our weapons, but somehow a compound bow managed to access target positions that defeated our entire tactical approach." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of David Kim, who approached with the eager expression of someone who'd spent considerable time analyzing technical data that might provide answers to questions that had been nagging at him since yesterday's demonstration. His tablet displayed trajectory calculations and ballistic analysis that represented hours of work attempting to reverse engineer capabilities that seemed to violate established principles. "Guys, I think I figured out part of what we saw yesterday," Kim said, his excitement barely contained within professional bounds. The arrow performance wasn't just about trajectory angles. Those projectiles were incorporating some kind of advanced guidance system that allowed for course corrections during flight. Williams frowned, his sniper training providing enough knowledge about projectile physics to recognize the implications of Kim's analysis. "Guided arrows? That sounds like science fiction, not tactical equipment. What kind of guidance system could fit into an arrow shaft without affecting its flight characteristics?" Kim's tablet displayed technical diagrams that looked more like aerospace engineering than weapons development, his analysis revealing layers of complexity that hadn't been apparent during the live demonstration. Microscale electronics integrated into the arrow tips, probably using magnetic field sensors for navigation and tiny actuators for flight path adjustment. "The technology exists, But implementing it in this configuration would require engineering capabilities that exceed most military development programs. Tank studied Kim's analysis with growing unease, recognizing that the technical sophistication implied by guided projectiles raised questions about Sarah's background that extended far beyond civilian consultant credentials. Military contractors with access to such technology didn't typically appear at routine training evaluations without generating substantial bureaucratic attention. If your analysis is correct, then yesterday's demonstration involved weapons technology that's significantly more advanced than anything in our current arsenal, Tank said slowly, his tactical mind processing the implications of facing opponents who might possess similar capabilities. The question becomes where civilian consultants acquire access to military hardware that apparently exceeds our own technological standards. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Rachel Torres, who'd been conducting her own analysis of yesterday's events from a medical perspective that provided different insights into the demonstration's technical aspects. Her training included extensive knowledge about non-lethal incapacitation methods, and the target elimination patterns had triggered professional curiosity about the arrow's impact mechanisms. I reviewed the target sensor data from yesterday's exercise, Torres said, settling into a chair with the focused attention of someone presenting findings that might change her colleagues' understanding of recent events. The arrows weren't causing mechanical damage to the target systems. They were triggering electromagnetic pulses that shut down the electronic components without affecting the physical structure. Williams whistled softly, his appreciation for technical sophistication overriding his initial skepticism about unconventional weapons. EMP arrows? That's not just advanced technology. That's specialized electronic warfare capability disguised as primitive weaponry. Who develops equipment like that, and why would they demonstrate it during a routine training evaluation? The implications of electromagnetic pulse capability extended beyond impressive demonstrations into operational concerns that affected every aspect of modern military technology. Electronic warfare weapons could disable communications, targeting systems, and vehicle electronics, providing tactical advantages that traditional kinetic weapons couldn't match under certain circumstances. Tank's tactical training included sufficient electronic warfare knowledge to understand that EMP capability represented a paradigm shift in weapons technology rather than simply an interesting curiosity. If Torres is right about the IMP effects, then those arrows could disable our communications, targeting systems, and electronic equipment without causing physical damage that would trigger automatic response protocols. Kim's technical analysis supported Torres' medical assessment, his engineering background providing the framework for understanding how electromagnetic pulse weapons might be integrated into projectile delivery systems. The beauty of that approach is that it bypasses conventional armor and defensive measures entirely. Our tactical gear is designed to stop kinetic projectiles and explosive fragments, not electromagnetic interference. Their analysis was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside Tank's office, the distinctive rhythm indicating military personnel moving with purpose rather than casual passage. Colonel Peterson appeared in the doorway with an expression that suggested official business rather than informal consultation, his bearing carrying the tension of someone dealing with complications that required immediate attention. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I need your team assembled for an urgent briefing in Conference Room Alpha," Peterson said, his tone indicating that questions would be inappropriate until after official information had been provided. "We've received priority tasking. That requires immediate deployment preparation." Tank's team exchanged glances that communicated shared concern about the timing of urgent deployment orders following yesterday's unusual demonstration. Military experience had taught them to recognize patterns that suggested connections between seemingly unrelated events, and the coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. Conference Room Alpha occupied the facility's secure wing, its location and technical specifications indicating that briefings conducted there involved classified information that required protection beyond standard administrative security measures. The room's electronic countermeasures and communication isolation systems suggested that today's briefing would address operational matters rather than routine training activities. The briefing materials spread across the conference table included satellite imagery, intelligence reports, and tactical assessments that bore classification markings, indicating information sources that extended beyond routine military intelligence. Channels. Tank recognized the format and presentation style of materials generated by agencies whose existence wasn't officially acknowledged, suggesting that today's mission parameters would involve complications that exceeded normal operational scope. Colonel Peterson activated the room's secure communication systems and verified that electronic countermeasures were functioning properly before beginning his briefing. Gentlemen, ladies, what I'm about to share with you is classified at levels that require formal acknowledgement of security obligations. The mission parameters I'll be discussing today fall under special access, protocols that restrict information sharing to essential personnel only. Tank's team settled into their chairs with the focused attention of professionals who understood that certain briefings preceded deployments that involved risks and responsibilities beyond routine military operations. The formal security procedures indicated that today's mission would require capabilities and discretion that separated elite units from conventional military forces. 48 hours ago, a civilian research facility in Eastern Europe was compromised by hostile forces seeking to acquire advanced technology that could significantly impact global security if it falls into unauthorized hands. Peterson continued, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone conveying information that had originated from sources with perspectives that encompassed international rather than merely national interests. The satellite imagery displayed on the briefing room's main screen showed a facility that appeared unremarkable from orbital perspective, its buildings and infrastructure indistinguishable from countless industrial complexes throughout the region. But the intelligence annotations and security assessments revealed layers of protection and technological sophistication that suggested capabilities extending far beyond conventional research activities. The facility houses development programs for advanced weapon systems that incorporate technologies currently unavailable through standard military procurement channels. Peterson explained, his careful phrasing indicating that certain details would remain classified even within this secure briefing environment. The hostile forces who've seized control of the facility include personnel with technical backgrounds sufficient to extract and utilize the research data for purposes that would compromise allied security interests. Tank studied the tactical assessment materials with growing awareness that this mission would require capabilities that pushed the boundaries of conventional special operations procedures. The facility's defensive measures included electronic countermeasures, automated security systems, and protection arrangements that suggested the research programs housed there involved national security implications of the highest priority. Sir, what's the timeline for hostile force extraction of the sensitive materials? Williams asked, his sniper training providing appreciation for the time factors that often determined mission success or failure in complex tactical environments. Peterson consulted his briefing materials before responding, his hesitation suggesting that certain timeline information involved sources or methods that couldn't be shared even within this secure setting. Intelligence assessments indicate that the hostile forces are approximately 72 hours away from completing their extraction activities. The technical complexity of the research materials requires specialized equipment and procedures that create opportunities for intervention if we can access the facility within that time frame. The mission parameters outlined in Peterson's briefing included infiltration requirements, target elimination protocols, and extraction procedures that represented the kind of high-stakes operations that justified Delta Force's reputation as one of the world's premier special operations units. But the technical specifications and security measures described in the intelligence reports suggested challenges that would test even elite capabilities. The facility's electronic security systems present particular challenges for conventional assault approaches, Peterson continued, activating displays that showed defensive arrangements designed by people who understood special operations tactics and had specifically prepared countermeasures. The hostile forces have disabled standard electronic warfare countermeasures and implemented protection protocols that could neutralize our conventional equipment advantages. Torres raised her hand with the respectful attention-seeking gesture that military protocol required during classified briefings. Sir, are we authorized to discuss specific equipment modifications or tactical adaptations that might address the electronic warfare challenges? Peterson's response came after consulting documents that bore classification markings, indicating approval from authorities whose decisions carried implications extending beyond immediate military concerns. The mission authorization includes provisions for non-standard equipment utilization and tactical approaches that fall outside conventional operational parameters. Your team is authorized to explore alternative methodologies that might provide tactical advantages under the specific conditions anticipated at the target facility. The subtext of Peterson's carefully phrased authorization was clear enough to Tank's experienced interpretation. They were being given permission to consider unconventional approaches that might include capabilities demonstrated by civilian consultants whose backgrounds involved classified programs that regular military personnel weren't supposed to know existed. Kim's technical background provided sufficient understanding to recognize that electronic warfare challenges might require solutions that bypassed conventional military equipment entirely. Sir, if the facility's defensive measures are specifically designed to counter our standard tactical gear, would we be authorized to requisition alternative equipment that might not be susceptible to the same countermeasures? Peterson's smile carried the grim satisfaction of someone who'd been hoping that his team would reach certain conclusions without requiring explicit guidance that might complicate future accountability assessments. Mr. Kim, I believe you'll find that alternative equipment options are already available through channels that have been established specifically to support missions with these particular requirements. Tank felt pieces of a complex puzzle beginning to align in ways that provided clarity about yesterday's demonstration and today's urgent deployment orders. The timing seemed too convenient to represent coincidence, and the authorization for non-standard equipment suggested that someone with broader perspective had been planning for scenarios that required capabilities beyond conventional military resources. Colonel, request permission to clarify the relationship between yesterday's training evaluation and today's mission parameters, Tank said, his tone maintaining military courtesy while seeking information that might be essential for mission planning. Are we being asked to consider tactical approaches that were demonstrated during recent evaluation activities? Peterson's pause before responding indicated that Tank's question approached boundaries of what could be discussed even within the secure briefing environment. Sergeant Rodriguez, let's say that recent evaluation activities provided valuable insights into tactical capabilities that might prove relevant to current operational requirements. The mission authorization includes provisions for consulting with subject matter experts who possess specialized knowledge about alternative methodologies. The implications were becoming clearer with each carefully worded exchange. Sarah's demonstration hadn't been a routine evaluation activity, but rather a capabilities assessment designed to determine whether alternative approaches might provide solutions to tactical challenges that conventional methods couldn't address effectively. Williams leaned forward with the focused attention of someone processing information that might affect his professional survival during complex operations. Sir, are we talking about electromagnetic pulse weapons and guidance systems that could function in environments where our standard equipment would be compromised? Peterson's response confirmed what Tank's team had already begun to suspect about the relationship between yesterday's demonstration and today's mission requirements. Mr. Williams, the target facility's defensive measures include electronic countermeasures that would significantly degrade the effectiveness of conventional weapons and communications systems, alternative approaches that don't rely on vulnerable electronic components might provide tactical advantages that could prove decisive under these specific conditions. The briefing materials included technical specifications for defensive systems that had been designed by people who understood special operations capabilities and had specifically prepared countermeasures for conventional assault approaches. Electronic jammers, automated targeting systems, and coordinated defensive protocols created a tactical environment that would challenge even elite military capabilities. Torres studied the medical assessment portions of the briefing materials. With growing understanding of why non-lethal incapacitation methods might prove more effective than conventional elimination approaches, the facility personnel include civilian researchers, whose safety represents a priority concern for mission success assessment. Collateral damage minimization appears to be a critical requirement rather than simply a preferred outcome. Peterson nodded, appreciating Torres' recognition of constraints that would affect tactical planning in ways that extended beyond immediate operational considerations. The research personnel represent irreplaceable expertise in technologies that have significant implications for national security. Their safety and cooperation are essential for complete mission success, which means that conventional assault approaches might create more problems than they solve. Tank's tactical experience provided sufficient background to understand that hostage rescue scenarios involving technical personnel required capabilities that balanced speed, precision, and restraint in ways that pushed the boundaries of conventional special operations training. The addition of electronic warfare challenges and time constraints created a tactical puzzle that would require innovative solutions. Sir, request permission to discuss consultation arrangements with subject matter experts who might provide guidance about alternative tactical approaches, Tank said, his careful phrasing acknowledging the classified nature of discussions that couldn't be explicitly referenced even within this secure environment. Peterson's approval came with the kind of bureaucratic precision that provided legal cover while acknowledging operational realities that required flexibility beyond standard procedures. Consultation arrangements have been established through appropriate channels. Subject matter experts will be available for technical guidance and equipment familiarization activities that support mission preparation requirements. The briefing concluded with deployment schedules and preparation timelines that allowed for equipment modifications and tactical planning sessions that would incorporate inputs from sources beyond conventional military channels. Tank's team understood that their next 72 hours would involve learning capabilities and approaches that hadn't been covered in their previous training experiences. As Peterson gathered his classified materials and secured the briefing room's communication systems, Tank found himself contemplating the intersection of yesterday's demonstration and today's mission requirements. The tactical challenges described in the intelligence reports seemed almost perfectly suited to the capabilities that Sarah had demonstrated, suggesting a level of operational planning that extended far beyond routine training evaluations. Team meeting in 30 minutes, Tank announced as they filed out of the secure briefing room. We need to discuss equipment modifications and tactical approaches that might be required for this mission profile. The corridor outside conference room Alpha buzzed with the kind of subdued activity that accompanied preparation for classified operations, but Tank noticed that certain personnel seemed to be avoiding eye contact in ways that suggested knowledge of activities that weren't part of routine base operations. The patterns of behavior indicated that yesterday's demonstration and today's briefing were components of larger operational planning that involved multiple agencies and clearance levels. Sarah's compound bow case remained positioned against the corridor wall where she'd left it yesterday, but Tank noticed that its location provided an unobstructed view of Conference Room Alpha's entrance and the personnel who'd attended today's classified briefing. The positioning seemed casual enough to avoid attention while providing excellent observation capabilities for someone with sufficient tradecraft training to recognize surveillance opportunities. Kim approached Tank's position with the eager expression of someone who'd been analyzing technical data that might provide insights into equipment requirements for operations involving electronic warfare countermeasures. Tank, I've been thinking about the EMP-resistant equipment requirements mentioned in the briefing. If conventional electronics are going to be compromised, we might need to consider mechanical systems and analog instruments that can function without vulnerable digital components. Tank nodded, his own tactical analysis reaching similar conclusions about equipment modifications that might be necessary for operations in environments designed to defeat modern military technology. Get with Williams and Torres to discuss backup systems and alternative approaches that don't depend on digital communications or electronic targeting systems. We might be going back to basics in ways that our recent training hasn't emphasized. The implications of preparing for missions that required analog equipment and mechanical systems represented a significant departure from the high-tech approaches that dominated contemporary military operations. But Tank's experience had taught him that tactical flexibility often proved more valuable than technological sophistication when facing opponents who'd prepared specifically to counter conventional capabilities. As his team dispersed to begin preparation activities, Tank remained in the corridor, studying Sarah's equipment case and considering the relationship between yesterday's capabilities, demonstration, and today's mission requirements. The coincidence seemed too convenient to represent chance, suggesting that operational planning had been underway long before yesterday's training evaluation had officially commenced. The compound bow case appeared unremarkable among the tactical equipment that filled Fort Blackstone's corridors, but Tank now understood that appearances could be deliberately misleading when dealing with capabilities that operated outside conventional military channels. Tomorrow's consultation sessions would provide opportunities to explore alternative approaches that might prove essential for mission success under the specific conditions they would face. David Kim returned to his workstation with technical specifications that would guide equipment modifications designed to function in electromagnetic warfare environments. But his analysis included questions about guidance systems and electronic components that seemed to require consultation with experts whose backgrounds extended beyond standard military technical training. The specifications suggested capabilities that bridged the gap between ancient reliability and modern precision in ways that conventional weapons development hadn't achieved. Tank settled at his desk to begin mission planning activities that would incorporate inputs from sources he was only beginning to understand. But the tactical challenges described in today's briefing required solutions that might depend on capabilities that had been demonstrated yesterday by a civilian consultant, whose background apparently included access to classified technologies that exceeded standard military resources. The next 72 hours would test more than just tactical skills and operational planning. They would determine whether conventional elite military training could adapt quickly enough to incorporate alternative methodologies that might represent the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure in environments specifically designed to defeat traditional special operations capabilities. The Eastern European facility sprawled across 12 acres of seemingly innocuous industrial landscape, its buildings connected by underground passages that hadn't appeared in any architectural plans the intelligence community had managed to acquire. Tank's team crouched in the tree line, 500 meters from the perimeter, their night vision equipment revealing defensive positions that confirmed the briefing materials had understated the tactical challenges they would face. Electromagnetic interference crackled through their communication systems like digital static, the hostile forces having activated jamming equipment that rendered their standard tactical radios nearly useless. Williams adjusted his scope for the third time in 10 minutes, frustrated by electronic targeting systems that flickered between operational and completely dead, depending on the interference patterns sweeping across the facility. Sarah emerged from the shadows behind their position with the fluid silence of someone who'd spent years moving through hostile territory without detection, her compound bow assembled and ready for deployment. Her approach had been so quiet that Tank's perimeter security hadn't registered her presence until she was close enough to touch, a demonstration of fieldcraft that impressed even experienced special operations personnel. "Good evening, gentlemen," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying just enough authority to suggest that her arrival represented official coordination rather than unauthorized infiltration. "I trust Colonel Peterson briefed you about consultation arrangements for tonight's operation." Tank turned to study Sarah's equipment configuration, noting modifications and additions that hadn't been present during yesterday's demonstration. At Fort Blackstone, her tactical gear reflected professional quality that matched their own standards, but the integration of conventional equipment with her specialized weapons system suggested capabilities that extended beyond simple archery. Expertise. "Ms. Chun, I have to admit I'm curious about how civilian consultants develop infiltration skills that apparently exceed our own perimeter security training," Tank said, his tone carrying professional respect mixed with questions about Sarah's background that extended beyond official briefing materials. Sarah's smile was barely visible in the green-tinted world of night vision equipment, but her response carried the confidence of someone accustomed to operating in environments where explanations weren't always possible or advisable. "Mr. Rodriguez, let's just say that some civilian consulting work involves field research that requires specialized skill development. Tonight's operation falls within my areas of professional expertise." Kim studied the facility's defensive arrangements through his spotting scope, his technical analysis revealing electronic countermeasures that would neutralize most of their equipment within minutes of beginning their assault. "The jamming systems are more sophisticated than the briefing materials indicated. Our targeting systems, communications, and electronic equipment are going to be essentially useless once we move closer to the facility." Torres checked her medical supplies while considering the tactical implications of operating without electronic support systems that had become integral to modern military operations. "We're looking at analog navigation, mechanical timing, and visual coordination for the entire operation. It's like going back to World War II tactics with contemporary opposition." Williams made final adjustments to his rifle scope while contemplating engagement scenarios that would require manual range estimation and windage calculations rather than digital fire control systems. At least the opposition will be dealing with the same electronic interference. Their advantage comes from knowing the facility layout and having prepared defensive positions. Sarah opened her equipment case and began final preparations for deployment, her movements revealing additional arrows whose specialized tips caught the ambient light in ways that suggested technological sophistication beyond conventional archery. Equipment. The electromagnetic interference will affect their automated defensive systems as well, but they've prepared manual backup procedures that we'll need to address. Tank consulted his tactical map one final time, though the paper document felt primitive compared to the digital displays they normally relied on for operational planning. 12 hostile personnel confirmed inside the facility, plus an unknown number of civilian researchers being held in the underground laboratory complex. Our objectives are neutralization of threats, recovery of research materials, and extraction of civilian personnel with minimal collateral damage. The mission timeline allowed for 90 minutes total, including infiltration, target neutralization, objective completion, and extraction to predetermined rally points where transport would be available. The time constraints reflected intelligence. assessments about when additional hostile forces might arrive to reinforce the facility's current defensive arrangements. Sarah positioned herself at the edge of the tree line with her compound bow ready for deployment, her vantage point providing clear lines of sight to defensive positions that Tank's team would need to neutralize during their approach. I'll provide overwatch and electronic warfare support during your initial advance. The EMP arrows will disable their backup power systems and emergency communications without triggering automated response protocols. Tank's team moved into final approach positions with the coordinated precision of professionals who'd rehearsed infiltration procedures countless times. But tonight's operation required adaptations to account for equipment limitations that hadn't been factors in their previous training. Manual timing devices replaced electronic chronometers, analog compasses substituted for GPS navigation, and hand signals provided the only reliable communication method. The facility's perimeter defenses included motion sensors and automated tracking systems that would normally present significant challenges for covert approach. But the electromagnetic interference that disabled Tank's equipment also degraded the hostile forces' detection capabilities. Sarah's first arrow found the primary sensor array, its EMP tip creating a localized electromagnetic pulse that shut down electronic surveillance without triggering mechanical backup systems. Williams moved through the outer defensive perimeter, with his rifle held in traditional shooting positions that didn't depend on electronic sighting systems, his training from earlier decades proving more relevant than recent technological adaptations. The hostile sentry at Position 1 fell to a precisely placed shot that relied on fundamental marksmanship skills rather than digital fire control assistance. Tank advanced toward the facility's main entrance while Sarah's arrow systematically eliminated electronic defensive systems that would have made conventional assault approaches impossible. Each EMP arrow created cascading failures in interconnected security networks, but the effects appeared to be simple equipment malfunctions rather than coordinated electronic warfare attacks. Kim reached the facility's power distribution center and began manual shutdown procedures for backup generators that would have restored defensive capabilities within minutes of primary power failure. His technical training included sufficient electrical engineering knowledge to disable complex systems without triggering emergency protocols that might alert the hostile forces to their infiltration progress. Torres established her overwatch position with medical supplies and backup communications equipment that would be essential if the operation encountered complications, requiring emergency response procedures. Her vantage point provided visual coverage of multiple approach routes while keeping her position for rapid response to casualty situations or extraction emergencies. The facility's interior layout matched intelligence reports with disturbing accuracy, suggesting that the hostile forces had been planning this operation for months and possessed detailed architectural information that should have been classified. Tank moved through corridors that felt like navigating a maze designed by someone who understood special operations tactics and had prepared specific countermeasures. Hostile personnel occupied defensive positions that maximized their advantages, while limiting Tank's team's ability to use conventional assault techniques. The narrow corridors and multiple choke points created tactical challenges that would have been difficult to overcome even with full electronic support. But the electromagnetic interference levels made coordination significantly more complex. Sarah's infiltration route took her through the facility's upper levels, where her compound bow provided silent elimination capabilities that conventional weapons couldn't match in close quarters environments. The arrow's specialized tips allowed for non-lethal incapacitation that left hostile personnel unconscious rather than dead, reducing collateral damage while maintaining operational security. Williams encountered the first major defensive position at the corridor junction leading toward the underground laboratory complex, where 3 hostile personnel had established overlapping fields of fire that would challenge even exceptional marksmanship skills. His approach required patience and precision that electronic targeting systems might have complicated rather than assisted. The tactical engagement unfolded with mechanical precision as Williams eliminated threats through careful shot placement that relied on training fundamentals rather than technological assistance. Each engagement was brief but decisive, hostile personnel falling to shots that demonstrated why elite military training emphasized core skills that remained effective, regardless of equipment limitations. Tank reached the laboratory complex entrance to discover that the hostile forces had prepared for exactly this type of infiltration, with defensive arrangements that suggested professional military training and detailed knowledge of special operations procedures. The challenge wasn't simply overcoming opposition, but doing so while protecting civilian researchers, whose safety represented mission-critical requirements. Kim's technical analysis of the laboratory security systems revealed that the research materials were protected by electronic locks that would be impossible to breach without causing data destruction that would compromise mission objectives. The facility's designers had anticipated forced entry attempts and prepared countermeasures that required alternative approaches. Sarah appeared at Tank's position with the silent efficiency that had characterized her movement throughout the operation, her presence indicating that the upper-level threats had been neutralized without alerting the remaining hostile personnel. The laboratory access requires manual override procedures that I can accomplish without triggering the data destruction protocols. Tank watched Sarah approach the laboratory security console with confidence that suggested familiarity with systems that weren't supposed to exist in civilian contractor databases. Her fingers moved across manual controls with the precision of someone who'd operated similar equipment before, bypassing electronic locks through mechanical procedures that avoided automated security responses. The laboratory complex contained research materials that confirmed the intelligence briefings had understated the technological significance of what the hostile forces had been attempting to acquire. Technical documentation and prototype equipment represented advances in electromagnetic weapons and guidance systems that would provide significant tactical advantages to whoever controlled their development and deployment. Torres coordinated the evacuation of civilian researchers while Tank's team secured the research materials and prepared for extraction from a facility that would soon be reinforced by additional hostile forces. The civilian personnel included technical experts whose knowledge represented strategic assets that required protection beyond simple rescue operations. Williams provided overwatch during the extraction phase, his position offering visual coverage of approach routes that additional hostile forces might use to complicate their withdrawal from the facility. The operation timeline showed 63 minutes elapsed, leaving sufficient margin for movement to extraction points before reinforcement arrival. Sarah's electronic warfare capabilities proved essential during the withdrawal phase, her EMP arrows disabling vehicle electronics and communication systems that hostile forces attempted to use for coordination with incoming reinforcements. The electromagnetic pulses created confusion and communication failures that provided tactical advantages during the most vulnerable phase of their operation. Tank's team reached the predetermined extraction point with mission objectives accomplished and civilian personnel secured, their success representing validation of tactical approaches that had bridged ancient reliability with modern precision requirements. The operation had required capabilities that conventional military training hadn't emphasized, but alternative methodologies had provided solutions that electronic systems couldn't have achieved. The transport helicopter arrived exactly on schedule, its pilot navigating through electronic interference that would have challenged less experienced aviators. Tank's team secured the civilian researchers and research materials while Sarah disassembled her compound bow and prepared for extraction procedures that would return them to Fort Blackstone for detailed debriefing. During the flight back to base, Tank found himself contemplating the relationship between yesterday's demonstration and tonight's successful mission completion. The tactical challenges they'd faced had been perfectly suited to capabilities that Sarah had demonstrated, suggesting operational planning that extended beyond coincidental timing. "Miss Chun, I think it's time for some honest conversation about who you really are and what your actual role has been in this operation," Tank said, his tone carrying the respect of someone who'd witnessed exceptional professional competence under challenging conditions. Sarah's response came after a pause that suggested consideration of how much information could be shared without violating security protocols that governed multiple agencies and classification levels. "Mr. Rodriguez, my background includes extensive experience with operations that require capabilities beyond conventional military resources. Tonight's mission fell within my areas of professional specialization." Williams leaned forward with curiosity that had been building since yesterday's archery demonstration had revealed capabilities that exceeded his understanding of civilian contractor qualifications. "What kind of civilian consulting work develops electronic warfare expertise and infiltration skills that match special operations training?" Sarah's smile carried the diplomatic precision of someone accustomed to navigating questions about professional activities that couldn't be discussed in detail, even within secure military environments. "Let's say that some government consulting positions involve field research that requires specialized skill development and equipment familiarity that extends beyond traditional academic approaches." Kim's technical background provided sufficient understanding to recognize that Sarah's capabilities suggested training and resources that weren't available through standard civilian channels. "The guidance systems in those arrows represent technology that's significantly more advanced than anything in our current military inventory. Where do civilian consultants acquire access to developmental weapon systems?" Tank studied Sarah's expression while considering implications that extended beyond immediate operational concerns. "Ms. Chun, I'm beginning to suspect that your civilian consultant credentials represent cover for activities that fall under different classification authorities than our normal chain of command." Sarah's acknowledgement was subtle but unmistakable, her response indicating that Tank's assessment was approaching accuracy without requiring explicit confirmation that might violate security protocols. "Mr. Rodriguez, tonight's operation required coordination between multiple agencies with different capabilities and jurisdictional authorities. My participation was authorized through channels that extend beyond standard military consultation arrangements." The helicopter approached Fort Blackstone with mission completion confirmed and personnel accountability established. But Tank understood that tonight's events would generate detailed analysis and assessment processes that might influence future training and operational procedures. The successful integration of alternative methodologies with conventional special operations had provided capabilities that neither approach could have achieved independently. Torres gathered her medical equipment while contemplating the implications of operations that required coordination between military and civilian agencies whose capabilities complemented rather than duplicated each other. Tonight's mission succeeded because we combined conventional tactical excellence with specialized capabilities that addressed specific technological challenges. The question becomes whether this represents a new operational model or a unique circumstance. Colonel Peterson waited in the debriefing area with expression that suggested satisfaction with mission completion mixed with anticipation of discussions about operational details that would influence future planning and training development. His presence indicated that tonight's success had generated interest from authorities whose perspectives encompass strategic rather than merely tactical considerations. "Outstanding work, people," Peterson said as Tank's team secured their equipment and prepared for detailed mission analysis. The operation exceeded all performance objectives and demonstrated tactical capabilities that will definitely influence our future training development programs. Tank approached Peterson with questions that had been developing throughout the mission about the relationship between Sarah's participation and broader operational planning that seemed to extend beyond routine consulting arrangements. "Sir, request permission to discuss the coordination procedures that enabled tonight's success. The integration of alternative capabilities with our standard operations suggests planning that involved multiple agencies and classification authorities." Peterson's response indicated that Tank's questions were appropriate, but that complete answers would require discussions involving personnel with broader authorization than immediate facility staff possessed. Sergeant Rodriguez, tonight's operation was conducted under special access protocols that enable coordination between military and civilian agencies with complementary capabilities. The success of this integration will definitely influence future operational planning and training development. Sarah gathered her equipment with the same understated efficiency that had characterized her participation in both yesterday's demonstration and tonight's mission, her movement suggesting someone accustomed to transitioning between different operational environments without generating attention that might complicate security arrangements. "Mr. Rodriguez, thank you for your professional cooperation during tonight's operation," Sarah said, her tone carrying genuine appreciation for tactical excellence that had enabled mission success under challenging conditions. "Your team's adaptability and skill provided the foundation for capabilities integration that achieved objectives that neither conventional nor alternative approaches could have accomplished independently." Tank accepted Sarah's acknowledgement, while recognizing that questions about her background and the broader implications of tonight's operation would require discussions through channels that extended beyond immediate debriefing procedures. "Ms. Chun, I hope we'll have opportunities for future cooperation. Tonight's mission demonstrated that conventional excellence and specialized capabilities can achieve remarkable results when properly coordinated." The debriefing process would continue for hours as mission details were documented and analyzed for lessons that might influence future training and operational procedures. But Tank understood that the most significant implications would be discussed through classification channels that involved authorities whose perspectives encompass strategic considerations beyond tactical execution. As personnel dispersed toward their respective duties and responsibilities, Tank reflected on the evolution from yesterday's skepticism about primitive weapons to tonight's appreciation for capabilities that had proven essential for mission success. The experience had demonstrated that effectiveness often depended more on adaptability and precision than on technological sophistication alone. Sarah's compound bow case disappeared into the administrative areas where specialized equipment was processed through channels that didn't appear in standard military logistics systems. But Tank understood that her capabilities would remain available for future operations that required coordination between conventional excellence and alternative methodologies. The mission's success represented more than tactical achievement. It demonstrated that elite military capabilities could be enhanced rather than replaced by specialized approaches that addressed specific technological challenges through innovative solutions. The integration had created operational possibilities that neither conventional nor alternative methods could have achieved independently. 3 weeks later, Fort Blackstone's training protocols included new modules that emphasized analog navigation, mechanical timing, and tactical approaches that remained effective in electronic warfare environments. The curriculum modifications reflected lessons learned from operations that had required capabilities beyond standard military training parameters. Tank's team continued their regular duties with enhanced appreciation for fundamental skills that remained effective regardless of technological interference, but they also understood that future operations might require coordination with specialists whose backgrounds extended beyond conventional military experience. Sarah's name appeared occasionally in operational planning documents that crossed Tank's desk, her expertise listed among available resources for missions that involved electronic warfare challenges or required capabilities that bridge traditional reliability with modern precision requirements. The listings were brief and provided minimal background information, but Tank recognized that certain operational capabilities would remain available through channels that extended beyond standard military resources. The compound bow demonstration, that had initially seemed like an anachronistic curiosity, had proven to represent capabilities that could provide decisive advantages under specific operational conditions. Tank's understanding of tactical effectiveness had expanded to include approaches that emphasize precision and adaptability over raw technological power. Fort Blackstone's equipment inventory now included manual backup systems and analog instruments that would function effectively in electromagnetic warfare environments. But Tank understood that the most valuable lesson from their recent operation involved recognition that tactical excellence could be enhanced through integration with specialized capabilities rather than replacement by alternative approaches. David Kim's technical analysis of the EMP arrows had been classified and forwarded to developmental authorities whose research programs would incorporate lessons learned from field testing under operational conditions. The technology represented advances that would influence future weapons development, but the immediate impact involved enhanced understanding of alternative approaches to tactical challenges. Tank's respect for Sarah's capabilities had evolved from initial skepticism through professional appreciation to recognition that certain specialists possessed skills and resources that exceeded conventional military training parameters. The experience had demonstrated that elite capabilities could be enhanced rather than threatened by coordination with expertise had operated under different authorities and classification systems. The mission's long-term implications extended beyond immediate tactical lessons to include recognition that future operations might require coordination between military excellence and civilian capabilities that addressed specific technological challenges through innovative approaches. The integration had created possibilities that neither conventional nor alternative methods could have achieved independently, establishing models for future cooperation between agencies with complementary rather than competitive capabilities. Tank settled into his regular duties with enhanced understanding of tactical possibilities that extended beyond standard military training. But he also maintained awareness that certain capabilities would remain available for operations that required coordination between conventional excellence and specialized expertise that operated through channels extending beyond immediate military authorities. The compound bow that had initially appeared primitive now represented sophisticated integration of ancient reliability with modern precision, demonstrating that tactical effectiveness often depended more on adaptability and innovation than on technological complexity alone. Tank's appreciation for alternative approaches had evolved through direct experience with capabilities that had proven essential for mission success under challenging operational conditions. Sarah's consultation had concluded officially, but Tank understood that her expertise would remain accessible through channels that enabled coordination between military operations and civilian capabilities when mission requirements exceeded standard training parameters. The relationship represented recognition that tactical excellence could be enhanced through integration with specialized skills that operated under different authorities but shared common objectives. The experience had transformed Tank's understanding of tactical possibilities while reinforcing his appreciation for conventional military excellence that provided the foundation for enhanced capabilities integration. Future operations would benefit from lessons learned about coordination between different approaches that achieved results exceeding what either conventional or alternative methods could accomplish independently. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.